she's been called the Queen of Country, a living legend, and a national treasure. But behind the rhinestones, the laughter, and the big hair, Dolly Parton has carried a life filled with battles the public never truly saw. At 79, as she approaches an age where most stars quietly fade from view, Dolly is doing something entirely different. She's revealing the truth. And what she's finally ready to say has left even her closest friends in tears. For decades, Dolly smiled through everything: loss, health scares, heartbreak, and unspoken sacrifices. But now, after nearly 60 years in the spotlight, she's opening up about the cost of her fame, the truth about her lifelong marriage, and the one moment behind closed doors that changed her forever. It's not just a story of survival, it's a story of silent strength, deep regret, and an emotional revelation she's kept hidden for too long. Why is Dolly finally speaking up? Now, what has she endured in silence all these years, and what heartbreaking truth did she just share that even shocked her inner circle? This isn't just another celebrity headline, it's a rare, vulnerable glimpse into the pain behind the legend. Because now, for the first time, Dolly Parton is pulling back the curtain, and what she reveals may change the way you see her forever. Try not to cry when you hear what she just shared at 79, because the woman behind the voice is more human and more heartbroken than we ever imagined. For most of her life, Dolly Parton was a master of distraction. With her dazzling smile, sharp wit, and rhinestone-studded charm, she could steer any conversation away from pain and into laughter. But behind the glittering facade, there has always been a woman carrying a quiet, aching solitude. And now at 79, that solitude has finally come to the surface. The turning point didn't come with flashing cameras or red carpets. It came in silence behind the scenes, when Dolly received a phone call that left her frozen. A longtime friend, someone she'd loved like family, was gone. And suddenly, the world that Dolly had spent decades building, the world full of music, light, and endless giving, felt unbearably hollow. That loss triggered something deeper than grief. It cracked open years of unspoken heartache, and for the first time, Dolly found herself unable to hide behind the sparkle. This wasn't just about death. It was about all the emotional weight she'd carried quietly for so long. Losing her parents, watching old friends fade into illness, grappling with her own health scares, and the deep loneliness that can come with being a legend everyone admires. But few truly know, she admitted recently with her voice shaking. I've always been the one to lift others up. But I realized I never really let anyone lift me. That admission, coming from one of the most beloved and outwardly joyful figures in music history, was heartbreaking. Because it peeled back the curtain on a truth many suspected, but Dolly never confirmed, that her laughter was often armor. For years, she quietly battled chronic pain, anxiety, and the pressure to always be on. And through it all, she held the weight of her fame with a grace that made it look effortless. But now, at 79, the cracks are beginning to show, and Dolly is finally allowing herself to be vulnerable, not for sympathy, but for honesty. She knows her time in the spotlight may be nearing its end, and she wants to go out not just as a star, but as a whole person. And part of that means acknowledging the moments that nearly broke her. Friends close to Dolly say they've seen a change. She's more reflective now, quieter, less concerned with the show, more interested in connection. She's been talking about her childhood again, one confidant said. About her mama, her lost siblings, the pain she tucked away to survive. And she's been asking what people will remember when she's gone. Those who know her best say she's begun writing letters, private, handwritten notes to people who touched her life, to say things she never had the chance to say. And while she hasn't publicly said goodbye, the tone of her recent interviews, her music, and her private reflections point to a woman preparing for her final act, not in fear, but in peace. But make no mistake, Dolly is not done. She's still creating, still planning, still singing. But she's also letting herself feel things she once buried beneath rhinestones and applause. She's admitting that even legends have lonely nights. Even icons carry wounds. And maybe the bravest thing Dolly Parton has ever done is tell the truth about her pain. For decades, Dolly Parton was a master at turning pain into poetry. Her songs, full of heartbreak, hope, and longing, were windows into a soul that rarely let itself be truly seen. But while she sang of sorrow with perfect pitch, she never let the public see the toll that life and fame was quietly taking on her body. In truth, Dolly has spent much of the last decade battling a series of hidden health crises, ones that she kept tucked away beneath her high heels and dazzling stage costumes. Chronic back problems, severe nerve pain, and even a series of secret surgeries were all endured in silence. Behind the curtains of Dollywood, behind the standing ovations, there were nights she could barely stand. And yet she showed up, every time. Because that's what Dolly does. She performs, she gives, she keeps smiling, until now. Close friends say that around her mid-70s, something began to change. The pain, long held at bay, started catching up. The surgeries left her weakened, her energy waned, and for the first time, she began quietly canceling appearances. Not out of vanity, but necessity. She didn't want anyone to worry, one friend shared. She still wanted to be the strong one. And that's always been Dolly's way, shouldering not just her own struggles, but the burdens of everyone around her. Yet behind closed doors she was suffering. Pain flared in her hips, her hands sometimes trembled from years of guitar playing, and sleep became increasingly elusive. The woman who had once been larger than life was slowly, gently, being humbled by the one thing no fame can outrun: time. But Dolly didn't want pity. And she certainly didn't want headlines. That's why she kept it hidden. While tabloids speculated and fans whispered, she endured her health battles in private, never once using them for attention. That's the paradox of Dolly Parton, an icon so open in her music, yet so fiercely private in her real life. But now, at 79, she's quietly beginning to share the truth, not as a cry for help, but as a way to connect. She wants her fans to understand that the glitter was always a little heavy, that the weight of being Dolly Parton sometimes made it hard to breathe. And yet, even in her most vulnerable moments, she remained generous, loving, and entirely devoted to the people who made her who she is. In a rare behind-the-scenes moment, one of her team members recalled seeing Dolly sitting quietly backstage, tears in her eyes, not from sadness, but from sheer exhaustion. She looked at me and said, "I'm not sure how much longer I can do this." It was the first time anyone had heard those words from her. But even then, just minutes later, she was on stage, glowing, delivering every note as if nothing was wrong. That's the tragedy and the triumph of Dolly Parton. She gave even when she had nothing left to give, and as she now opens up, slowly, gently, about the toll of her journey, fans are finally seeing not just the legend, but the woman. A woman who hurt, a woman who held on, a woman who still sings, even through the pain. In the grand halls of country music history, Dolly Parton's name is etched in gold, a legend, an icon, a woman who made the world smile with her charm and cry with her truth. But even with the admiration of millions and the applause of generations, Dolly has lived much of her life in a kind of beautiful isolation. From the outside, she seemed to have it all: success, fortune, love. But when the lights dimmed and the audience went home, what remained was a woman who often felt deeply alone. She once said in an interview, "Sometimes I'm the loneliest person in the world, but I never let it show." And that was the truth she rarely let the world see. At the heart of that quiet ache was the complex, elusive nature of her marriage to Carl Dean, a man who famously avoided the spotlight as fiercely as Dolly embraced it. For over 5 decades, they've been married, but to this day, photos of them together are almost non-existent. Friends close to Dolly have said that while Carl supported her from the shadows, their relationship was built on distance, geographical and emotional. They lived in different rhythms. She, a woman of the world; he, a man who preferred the quiet. Despite their long-lasting bond, Dolly has spent much of her life alone. On the road, in hotels, in dressing rooms filled with silence after thunderous applause. She chose fame, but fame didn't fill the spaces where connection should have lived. She gave her heart to her fans, to her music, to her mission, but rarely to herself. And though she never had children, she became a mother figure to millions. Yet privately, she's admitted that the absence of a family of her own still lingers. "God didn't give me children," she once said, "but he gave me a voice. And I tried to use it to lift others. It was a trade-off, one she accepted, but never one she stopped feeling. And now, at 79, as so many of her peers have passed on and the world feels quieter, that loneliness has become harder to ignore. She surrounds herself with people, assistants, musicians, business partners. But there's a difference between being around people and being with someone. Dolly's inner circle is tight, fiercely protective, but even they admit that she's grown more introspective in recent years. She often speaks of legacy, of faith, of the people she's lost along the way. And sometimes, without warning, her eyes well up when speaking about friends like Kenny Rogers or her parents, gone now, but never far from her thoughts. The girl from the Smoky Mountains who once dreamed of rhinestones and fame is now a woman looking back at all she gave up to shine so brightly. And the cost is heavier than most will ever understand. Yet even in her sadness, Dolly doesn't blame anyone, not even herself. She believes everything in her life happened as it was meant to. But as she begins to tell the truth about her pain, her health, and the moments that shaped her soul, what emerges is not a story of regret, but of revelation, of finally letting go of the image and allowing the world to see the woman who lived beneath the wigs, the laughter, and the sparkle. The woman who still hurts. The woman who still hopes. The woman who, even at 79, is learning how to say, "I need someone too." Now at 79, Dolly Parton is no longer chasing the spotlight. She's standing in it one last time, not for applause, but for closure. In these quiet twilight years, the icon who once dazzled with rhinestones and stage lights is gently lowering the curtain, not with sadness, but with grace. She knows what's coming. She feels the passage of time with every aching joint, every voice crack that wasn't there before, every friend lost to the years. And yet she's not afraid, because Dolly's legacy is already written, in the hearts of millions, in the songs that raised generations, in the laughter she gave to others while her own tears fell in private. But now, she's ready to do something she's never done before, say goodbye her way, quietly, on her terms. With purpose. She's been recording what she calls her final songs, tracks she may never release while alive, tucked away like precious keepsakes, sealed in a time capsule to be opened after she's gone. And in those lyrics, she says everything she never said aloud, the love she never confessed, the pain she kept hidden, the wisdom she wishes she'd shared sooner. Those close to her say she's begun making peace with every part of her life. She's been writing letters, not just to friends but to her fans, to the girl she once was in the Smoky Mountains, and even to Carl, the quiet man who stood beside her without ever needing to be seen. Her mansion feels a little emptier now. The tour buses are still. The makeup chair is less used. But Dolly, she's not fading. She's preparing. Preparing to leave the world with one final gift, honesty. The kind of honesty she once feared. The kind that says, "I've lived a full life, but even in the fullness there were cracks." And that's okay. She's made it clear. There will be no grand farewell tour. No teary stage announcements. Just a quiet retreat, a graceful bow, and a final chorus sung in silence. Her biggest fear isn't death. It's being remembered only as the performer. Because Dolly wants people to know she was more than the wigs, the laughter, the charity, the legacy. She was a woman who hurt, who loved deeply, who longed for connection just like anyone else. And maybe that's the greatest tragedy of all, how someone who gave so much to the world could carry such a private weight. But in telling her truth now in these final chapters, she is lightening that burden. She is showing her fans that vulnerability is not weakness, it's courage. And for a woman who spent her life hiding pain beneath sequins, that may be her most powerful message yet. In one of her final interviews, she said softly, "I don't want people to cry when I'm gone. Unless it's because I touched their heart. That's all I ever wanted, and she has. In ways that most artists never will. Through every song, every smile, every act of kindness no one ever saw, Dolly Parton became more than a star. She became a feeling, and as she slowly steps away from the world that adored her, she leaves behind not just music, but a message. Be kind. Be brave, be real, and never forget to love yourself, even when it hurts.